sweaters called there?
Jumpers.
What's the what's the reasoning behind that?
It's
There's always a train of thought, right? Like
I'm sure there
how
is. I'm sure there's some sort of background story to it. I don't know offhand though. I guess probably do a quick little search. But yeah, jumpers, that's kind of sweaters or even like a sweatshirt, like I'm wearing right now, that would be considered a jumper.
yeah, I can't wait to see what the thought process on this is.
I don't know. Let's see
It's
if I
like
can
a
get
it's always like a Family Guy episode to like figure out how these terms come about.
Okay, so this just the quick thing says here, the reason sweaters are called jumpers in the UK lies in the evolution of language, history, and culture. The word jumper originated from the French jupe, referring to a tunic or outer garment, and gradually transformed into its modern meaning as a knitted woolen top.
See, that's disappointing because now you have to give credit to the French.
What's interesting though is like that's one of the things that like I've begun to realize more and more the longer we're here is just how much of UK culture is actually shaped by French culture. Because when, William Conqueror came over from Normandy and conquered the Anglo-Saxons, like there was a merging of Anglo-Saxon language and French language, and you see that. So there's lots of overlap there. So yeah, it kind of makes sense now.
Did you see the Ridley Scott Napoleon movie?
Didn't know.
So it's not great, but
That's what I've heard.
and one of the reasons why is it's basically pretty easy. Like you see it right away of just like Ridley Scott, who's this Englishman, and it's just his chance to just dump on French culture.
Exactly.
It's so one sided the
Yeah.
way that like even casting Joaquin Phoenix as Napoleon, and Napoleon is there's a lot of like history of like, oh, he was a really short man, and that's where the whole like short man complex comes
Yeah.
from.
Yeah.
So like there's a lot of like fodder there, but like it's just like any chance he gets, it's just like, oh yeah, the French are just ridiculous, you know?
It's just pretty crazy. I mean, the other thing too that I think is interesting just about that is that you not only have like the William the Conqueror aspect of it and affecting the culture here, but if you go back even further, both in Great Britain and in France, both of those, particularly Normandy, were heavily influenced by Vikings. So like when the Vikings obviously in the, six, seven, 800s had a huge influence here in Great Britain, but like William the Conqueror, Normandy was settled by a dude named Rollo who was a Viking, And so just going back further, you think about how that culture has had such a big impact. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it is. I was trying to think too, like what who for Americans do we kind of like think of like this is our arch rival, like the England France thing is pretty good, but
Yeah,
for
it
us
goes
it's
back a
like
long time.
for us I guess it would be the English, but not really because we don't really like over the past 100 years or so we've become so intertwined, especially in global issues we're so aligned on, like wars specifically.
Yeah.
But, I was thinking about that today or this morning because I just read the story about how Trump is calling Justin Trudeau, the
Governor.
Canadian, yeah, he was calling him governor. And it's like, why do we? And he also said that maybe we can make Mexico a state, and he's just sort of like just bullying our neighbors. And I was just thinking like, there's not even like that's not even like a rivalry though, like but like Canada has done nothing but like been our pal. They're not. All of this is based on like who's the superpower and like who is more powerful, and it's obviously, we are or were in the region the top dog, but it just seems so strange to just pick on like the small people, but that's what bullies do.
Exactly. That's just their MO. I mean, I think like if you go back to when we were growing up, just us being of a certain generation, I would say like Russia. And the USSR would have been like kind of our rival, when you look at media, movies, Rocky 4, like all that sort of stuff. Like that would have been a pretty big, huge with the threat of nuclear war and everything. But kind of since that, I don't really know. It almost seems like the rest of the world is our rival. Like that's kind of the American mindset. It's us against everyone.
Yeah, it's the Jimmy Johnson Dallas Cowboy philosophy. It's us against everybody, which is, that is America's kind of motto, is just like, you know what, we're going to do whatever we want. I remember, I think I might have mentioned this before in one of these episodes where I was reading this book and it was like set post World War II in Germany when they're sort of carving everything up. And it's like a spy novel. And there was this character in there that said that, you could tell who is who by the way they walk. And he's like, the Germans walk like they used to own the world. The English walk around like they own the world. And the Americans walk around like they don't care who owns the world.
Interesting. Yeah,
Which
that's
is
an
kind of
interesting
true.
perspective.
Like we're just kind of like this sort of like, just rogue virus out there, just kind of doing whatever we want. But speaking of Russia, did you see that story this morning about the that Russian general being killed in Moscow?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, by the Ukrainians, which is strange. In Moscow,
Mm.
somehow they took him out in Moscow.
Wow, that's got to be pretty significant, right?
I know that's not a good look, Russia.
No, yeah, right in the heart of your country.
Yeah.
Mm.
So that was an interesting story that I saw. Also, all this stuff is coming out too. One of the big things is, we're getting close to RFK being sort of scrutinized and being accepted or not as the health administrator of America, and what's coming under the microscope is his thoughts on vaccines. And
Hmm.
the big thing was the polio vaccine. He's been vocal in saying that he wants to get rid of it and get rid of all vaccines. And the polio one came up, and Mitch McConnell, who I guess suffered from polio as a child, was like, no, polio vaccines are good. We need them. It eradicated this thing. And our grandfather had polio. So I'm not sure people know exactly, like younger people know what polio does, once you get it.
Yeah, probably not. I think that's the weird thing about it, though, is that like because I mean we have like 60 years of data on this vaccine. Like this is not some like you know random experimental deal that we're dealing with. Like the vaccine, for all practical purposes, eradicated polio. So to focus on a success and such a success like that just seems really, really a strange strategy for RFK Jr. and for Trump as well. I know Trump's come out and was like, "No, polio's a good one. That vaccine's a good one." But you can't believe anything he really says because he changes from day to day.
Well,
I just think it's a weird one.
RFK had to do a press conference. It's the first time he's spoken publicly since being appointed, and the only thing he said was, "No, no, polio vaccine's good."
Right, right.
So like you could, a lot of these things are happening. Like Trump did say, like he doesn't think that RFK will be as radical as people think he is. He won't be as crazy or out of the box. He says that he has an open mind, and like, he wouldn't have appointed him if he wasn't like, had an open mind about these issues. And it's like, who knows? I think it's just like in our political theater, it's like you say a bunch of stuff and then people come at you. And you're like, okay, well, that didn't work. I'll just dial it back a little bit. So
Hmm.
I don't think he'll get approved if there is some sort of approval process in this. I just think that nobody wants him.
I
Nobody
mean,
likes him.
there's definitely an approval process. This is a cabinet level position, so he's got to be confirmed by the Senate. So that's part of that's why all this is coming out, is because he's going around talking to senators. And they're basically asking him these questions, and that's why he's dialing it back, is because he's getting feedback of like, hey, listen, like there's no way we can approve you if you don't dial it back. And so that I think that's what's happening. It'll be interesting to see like whether or not he crosses the line and makes it or not. I don't know. It's interesting, like kind of the old political sort of maxim is during campaigning, you go to the extreme, and then once you get to the general election, or like in the primaries, you go to the extreme, and once you get to the general election, you kind of come back to the center, and then once you govern, you become even more centrist because you realize how difficult it is. I almost feel like like they're going the opposite direction. They like went extreme, extreme, extreme the closer they got to the general election. And now that they're governing, now all of a sudden that's like, oh no, no, yeah, that's not what we meant. So I don't. It's weird.
Yeah, I guess there was some sort of plan of just like for Trump to be like part of it was like a revenge factor. All of it is revenge for him. But I think mostly what he's doing is just like seeing how much he can get away with immediately. Because I think all of this it really is for him is just to clear away so he can make money and people that he knows that are close to him make money. I mean, I feel like I had that feeling with Bush, getting Dick Cheney in there and like Halliburton getting all these jobs in the Middle East and stuff like that. It just seemed like okay, they're just in it to sort of like make money and build these empires. And it feels like that's nothing new,
It's
you
not.
know?
Yeah, every administration does that.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't you don't particularly it's always the Republicans that you feel like are money centric and they're always saying like we want small government, which means no regulation, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
And but on the other side of that coin though is that they do want other things regulated. They don't want their money regulated, but they want society regulated. And it does seem to correlate with like okay, if you can keep people sort of satiated on this level and they don't question what you're doing macro, then everything's good, you know? And like I feel like that's what happened to the Democrats as well. They sort of like flipped over into that mode as well instead of like trying to work. There's this big narrative about like they lost the working class, and it's like they kind of did, that whole thing about them being elite and all that. It just seems like they're all playing the same game,
They are.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is ultimately about staying in power. I mean, I don't think it is about truly helping people and making the country better or whatever. I think it's about position, power, legacy, control, and regardless of what label you have, pretty much most people in that position are playing that game. So that's what makes it so discouraging when you have, as I think I said before, like we're just two bad choices. Um, so yeah, the whole thing needs just a refreshing. The whole thing needs to be rethought. There needs to be new political parties who have different platforms and different approaches and different ways just to give people something different and new.
Do you have you been following the thing that's happening in Germany?
I mean, a tad bit, a little bit.
Where their system was like they vote on I'm not sure I know understand it completely, but like they have sort of a three-party system, or they
Mhm.
did, right? And
I
then
think
like
so.
they're sort of like dissolving that to vote on a new form of government, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. Like, I mean, I could be totally off here, but I think it's somewhat similar to the UK system here, where you actually have a ton of parties, but there are few that get all the votes and rise to the top. I think it's similar in Germany. I do think there's more than three parties, but you kind of have the few that are the most popular. But I think what happens is like in the UK, you can do the same thing with parliament, where if the party that's in power is not, if there's kind of a vote of no confidence in some sense, you can call for a general election and basically dissolve the government in order to reform a new one. And so whatever party gets the most votes or has the most seats in parliament, I should say, they are in power, and whoever's the leader of that party becomes the prime minister. So you don't vote here, and I think it's the same way in Germany. You don't vote directly for the prime minister. You're actually voting for your local MP. And if that happens to be the party that has the most MPs, then that's the party that's going to put in the prime minister.
Yeah, why can't America do that?
I mean, I think there's something just deeply ingrained in America about voting directly for somebody, you know? And
Yeah.
that would be a really, really hard sell, I think, in the American culture to take that away.
Yeah. Well, so we're here today to talk about another mind virus, which I'm calling the Maga mind virus. And I feel like that's a trademark. I was looking it up. I was trying to trademark it because I Googled it and I was like, no one's using this term, And I feel like we should, make an effort to let people know that it started here on my brother's on MBD, my brother's
NBD.
steeper,
Yeah.
because it is like last time we talked about this sort of like I think both of us feel like it's not really like this. When you say virus, you think of something like very like all encompassing and it just takes over and you're like a zombie. There are similarities, but I don't think we think it's like that, like this thing that's like out of your control. It's sort of a thought process that you can either wholeheartedly believe in, or you could say, oh, there's some things in there that, make sense. And there's a lot of things in there that don't.
Hmm.
But I believe so. MAGA is, obviously an acronym that stands for Make America Great Again. And I have two questions for you. When was America great? And when this person ran on this platform and was elected 8 years ago and was in office for 4 years, did America become great again?
It's a great question. I guess it depends on like what factors you value the most in regards to the importance of America's standing. I mean, I don't know if when you ask that question, the first thing that actually popped into my head was this TV show. Did you ever watch The Newsroom that Aaron
Yeah.
Sorkin did? Did you watch? Do you know what I'm referring to in the very first episode, where Jeff Daniels' character, who plays a newscaster, is on a forum, a panel, and he's with like a bunch of different people, and they're in front of a university student audience, and someone takes questions from the audience, and this young college girl asked that question, something along the lines of, why is America the greatest country in history or to ever be or whatever? And he basically was like, what indicator by any measure would ever suggest we were the greatest country ever? And then he goes into literacy rate, mortality rate. Like he just goes into all of these sort of things, and America's nowhere near number one. So when you talk about your definition of great, I think it's more about perception, and I do think that probably the genesis of that comes from the standpoint that for most people, America represented democracy, and democracy for a long time was seen as a force of good in regards to freeing people, giving people rights, standing up for free speech, that sort of stuff. That America seemed to symbolize that, even though there's always been democratic countries whilst America's been in existence as well. We've never been the only one where you have free elections and you have free speech and you have freedom of religion and freedom of press and all those sorts of things. But I do think because America enumerated them in the Bill of Rights, that is unique to some degree. And so that in and of itself has kind of propagated that. And then with just the unbelievable economic expansion that then created leverage and power in the world. And we became a superpower because of that economic leverage of just the population itself, the amount of land, the resources that we had. I think that's all kind of factored into people's thought of it being great. So, to your question, I don't know if we ever were by most standards, but from the perception of the world, I think it's come that way. So, during those 4 years, were we great again? I don't think we were. Like, I don't think during from 2016 to 2020, I don't think there was any significant increase in our ranking and measurables that are important. And I would say like the way that America, from my perspective, being actually out of the country at the time, the way America handled COVID did not seem super encouraging to me. It was just kind of all over the map, and it was incredibly divisive. And it was, either you were being attacked or you were being dumb or whatever the case. It was crazy. So yeah, I don't think it, I don't, I think it's a slogan that just makes people feel something and it gives them a reason to hate the other side. I think in its worst form, that's what it is.
Yeah, I think for America, I don't think it was ever great. I think it was started over lust and blood and most of
What do you mean by that?
well, I mean, just the expansion over the continent, wasn't like for great reasons. It was just for like avarice, It wasn't like that's not a great way to start things. But what I'm saying is that I think at some point, like after World War II, I think this is what most people think where we were probably at our height, where, as a world power, and then into the 50s, like you're given this idea that America was like sort of this like really bucolic, sunny place. Like the economy was booming and the middle class boomed and we were just in this great place, and then the 60s come along and kind of ruined it for some people, like dirty hippies and all this stuff is like just, when we were talking about the woke mind virus, a lot of that stuff for me is like it's just a loop. It's just a circle coming back because as people get older and younger people become of age, there's always this misunderstanding of like, what are they doing? What kind of music are they making? What are they into? The language changes, like I was at the dentist the other day and the person's always asking you questions when they have something in your mouth when you can't answer them. On like this thing where they're like wanting you to participate and you're like, you have your fingers in my mouth. I can't answer you. But anyway, she's asking me questions about what we did for Thanksgiving. And I told her we went to Ohio, and she's like, oh, I have this kid in here who was like 14. And I asked him this question if he would like floss. And he was like, no, that's Ohio. And she was like, what? And he was like, that's Ohio means like, no, that's lame. I'm not going to do that.
Wow.
So like there's always these new, and then there was this conversation I had that was happening this last week, about like people, things that, younger, people are saying. And there's this language, right, that we don't understand and we don't have to look into. And it happens with every generation, and I feel like the sort of the wokeness is a big part of that is just people like not getting with the times, like when our dad was into rock and roll and the Beatles and all that stuff, his dad was like, "What is that? What is this stuff? I don't get this." And I think that that's part of what MAGA is just like trying to get back to this place where nothing changes and everything stays the same, you know.
Hmm.
But that is a
Yeah.
very nice way to that's a very nice way to put it because I think we've all
Yeah.
seen that MAGA is a white supremacist movement. Make America great means again, make America white again.
I mean, I think in its worst form, it is. I think there would be people who say that they are supportive of MAGA who would not be white supremacists. Like, I don't think you can paint them all with the same brush because I think it's much wider than that. I think there are levels of depth in regards to how far they go. Because I do think on one level, I would push back in saying that like the perception of America's greatness started after World War II. I think it was way, way before that. Because I think one of the reasons why so many people immigrated to the US well before, World War II was because of the opportunity. Like there legitimately was there's an opportunity to come to America and to create your own life, a brand new life that would not have been available in a lot of other places, particularly under, communist regimes and that sort of stuff. So I do think that there was a sense that, the land of opportunity was a real tangible thing. And for us in the 21st century, I do think we've lost that because we have grown up in the expansion of the middle class, and when people who are in the 98th, 99th percentile of the world who are living on less than $1 a day, they're going to look at what America does, and they don't care about the politics. They just care about the opportunity. So I do think that goes back further, for sure. But I think you're right. I think in its absolute worst form, there is this sense of wanting to, again, stay in control. And for the most part, right, like most of, recent history in the last 500, 600 years has been about, white males being in power. And there definitely is that sense, I think, that there's a thread of that in every nationalist movement, right? Because MAGA is a nationalist movement, but you're seeing nationalist movements all over as well. And so there is that thread, without question, of that happening for sure.
Well, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about, is it being sort of a global movement, because you see it with the person who bought the election, Elon Musk. He's from South Africa. So is Peter Thiel, who has a big interest in the same thing Musk is doing. And Musk is from a family, or his father made a bunch of money in South Africa under apartheid rules. And woke mind virus, he's obviously sort of the poster child for the MAGA mind virus. And he's a he's a he's a white supremacist. I don't think there's any way you could say it differently, because like he's been pushing anti-Semitic things on X. He's been nothing but trying to keep white people in power. Like I just don't see how it helps anyone else but white people. Like I'm sure that I know that black people, Hispanic people, they all voted. There's a big chunks of them voted for Trump. But I
Absolutely.
think some of those people might be MAGA. I think all this stuff is twisted up for a lot of people. Like
It is, and I
identity,
think that's why I think that's why there's layers. So I think that's why there would be people who would go, "Yeah, I'm MAGA," but they're not white nationalists. They're not racist because they're actually not white. And so I think for them, MAGA represents like conservative principles in regards to the economy. It represents small government, deregulation. That's what it represents. The problem is that a lot of the people who are the leaders of MAGA, like you're saying, do have these connections and they have these links in regards to white nationalist writings and, kind of propaganda and all that sort of stuff. And that, I think that's the dangerous aspect of it, is going, okay, what are the layers underneath that are pushing this, right? So like I don't know if you could look at anything, and this is the danger of it. I don't know if you could look at anything that Elon Musk has said and you could point to and say that is racist. It's not that clear, right? Like it's much more subtle in regards to policies, things he's talking about, and a lot of it comes down to economic policy.
well, I mean, I don't know if he's said it publicly, but like on his social media platform, he has definitely pushed neo Nazis, retweeted neo Nazis saying terrible things. So, like, I mean, I don't think he has to say it publicly. He's already said it in one format or another.
And I'm not trying. I'm not trying to disagree in regards to saying that he is or he isn't. What I'm trying to say though is I think that a lot of times when people retweet or affirm things, there is a sense where we jump to the lowest hanging fruit to go, that's what it's about. And it might be about it, but it might be about something else as well. And so what I think the challenge is, so like I was watching this video the other day where there was a debate going on and somebody was saying that about Trump. He's racist, he's this, he's that. And the person pushed back and said, point to one thing that Trump has said or done that is racist. And I think when you start getting into the details of things, what winds up happening is there's a lot of innuendo, and there's a lot of well, it points to this and this is what it would mean. So like, when you look at what he did back in, was it the 80s with the New York 7 or whatever, where
The five, Central Park 5.
the Part 5. So, and what his policies were around that time in regards to his housing and stuff. You look at that and you go, okay, that seems to be good evidence for a racially motivated decision, right? But you can't point at it and go, that was racist, because he would deny it. He doesn't come out and say, I hate black people. He doesn't say that. He doesn't come out and say, I hate Hispanics. He doesn't say it. And I think that's the argument and the conversation so difficult, is that we rarely push things to its roots. And what bothers me about Trump is that when you do push him to his roots or try to get to his roots, he just pulls the cord and doesn't want to talk anymore. And that's what I think frustrates in a lot of ways, is that you're like, okay, we're trying to get to what you actually believe and what you actually think. And either you're not able to articulate it, or you know where this is going and you don't want to be on record and admit it.
I think that's exactly what it is. I mean, there's tons of racists in America that have done that for years. Of like, they can't say it because they know that they can't, like, there's no tolerance for that anymore. So you have to say, like, when the thing happened in Charlottesville, that there are good people on both sides.
Exactly. And that would be one of the things that I would point to, and I would go, that seems pretty clear to me.
Yeah.
Trump's of an example that, to me, that's one of the clearest examples of going, okay, how can you, there's no other way to interpret that. You're saying there's two sides. One side is white nationalists and one side isn't. And you're saying there's good people on both sides. Square that for me as being, not racist. So I agree with you on that. And I think those are the sort of things that you've got to focus on and we've got to kind of push down to. And I think I think that's why people who are voting one way or the other, if people are voting MAGA and they're voting for Trump and they see him wear a MAGA hat, not everyone sitting there is a racist who's voting for Trump. On the other side, though, people who are voting for Biden or voting for Harris and think, oh, that's all about wokeism and that sort of stuff. Not every single person believes everything about the liberal progressive movement. Sometimes you have to make choices in regards to why you're voting for someone, and it actually is not all encompassing about what that person believes or is going to vote for. And I think that's why it's much more nuanced, layered conversation.
But with Trump, how do you justify voting for a rapist?
Well, people do it. So people justify it. And I would say that the way that they justify it, I mean, I think it's a difficult one, honestly.
You can't. This is where we move into this MAGA mind virus part of it, of being like, these people are out of their minds. They are living in this reality where the rules don't apply.
Yeah, but that's always been the case, though, Josh. I mean, people voted for Bill Clinton, and what he did with Monica Lewinsky would be considered rape today.
I mean, he definitely got put through the ringer on it, I guess you could say.
I
He
mean, not as bad
survived.
as, but when you say ringer, and again, I'm being like, devil's advocate here.
Hey,
He didn't go through.
I don't believe
He,
Bill Clinton's a good person.
right, but I agree. But what I would say is that, yeah, he went through the ringer, but I think comparatively, he didn't go through nearly as much as Trump has gone through. Trump's literally been convicted. Clinton was
Convicted
never
rapist.
convicted. Yeah, Clinton was never convicted. So he kind of skated by that one in many ways.
Sure. I mean, yeah, it's a different time, I guess. More information's out there, but that's another part of this whole MAGA mind virus. This is a point that we've been like pounding into the dirt. Is the information that you're receiving and you're
Yeah,
consuming
yeah,
is myopic in a lot of ways,
yeah. I
especially
agree.
if for whatever mind virus that you choose to have. Because I think it's not something that invades you without your permission, you know?
Yeah, but I don't know if it's always conscious as well. Right. So I agree with you. I think we always have a choice and we always have a moment where we can say stop. But I don't know if people are always consciously aware that when they're taking in certain forms of media or certain just people's perspectives, if they recognize what that's connected to as well. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
like I think that's one of the dangers of MAGA, is that you can go, well, listen, theoretically I'm for small government. Theoretically, I'm against, let's say abortion. Theoretically, I'm all for deregulation. Okay, that sounds good. And a lot of people are not making the connection to the deeper aspects of what it is that they're talking about, or the way that they're going about it as well. That's a huge issue.
Do you think our mother has the Maga mind virus?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, I think she's doing a lot of things without fully thinking through. Like, I think her vote and her reasons for voting for Trump probably are not as thought through as you or I would want them to be. Like, so I would imagine we'd raise 4 or 5 different issues, and her response would be like, "Well, I don't know about that." You know what I mean? So, in that regard, I think she's got what many voters have. She just has a political mind virus, and it just happens to be MAGA because there are more things that she agrees with than the other side. I don't think mom's a racist. I don't think mom's a bigot. I don't think she, actively wants to remain in power because she's never really been in power, from her perspective.
This is the unique thing I think about the virus is that it more often than not infects poor white people,
Hmm.
you know? And
Hmm.
like, way back in the day, if you were a poor white person, at least you weren't black. You had that
Hmm.
sort of standing in society, There may not be much of a difference, but at least you're white, you know? And it's sad because you're being kept down as much as anyone, but you're being used for your vote, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, and I think that's part of the reason why Trump won is because he had a message that I still don't fully grasp how, but it resonated with poor white rural America. You know, I know I mentioned this last time, but like, the fact that whatever he is, multimillionaire, billionaire, who, has gold toilet seats can resonate with a poor white rural person in Appalachia. I don't understand that connection other than they like the fact that he speaks from the hip, off the cuff, seems to go against the grain, which, the reality is that because of his economic policy, he's no different than, almost every other Republican before him. So it's a really, really strange paradox.
The gold toilet seat stuff is interesting because obviously he doesn't use them. He was on Joe Rogan afterwards. Rogan was like talking to someone on his show, and he was like, the guy was in here 3 hours and he never used the bathroom. Never once got up to take a piss. And it's like, it's because he's wearing a diaper, dude. Like,
I can go that long without going to the bathroom.
when you're in your 70s, we'll see.
Well, fair enough. Yeah, maybe so.
But that
Yeah.
never even like they can't put that in their mind. Like once you say like he's wearing a diaper, it would take away from what they're trying to project him as being like this strong leader.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, what happened
No,
in
of
the days
course.
when FDR who had polio?
Exactly. Yeah, and they did everything that they possibly could do to hide that, you know? Like, and
Yeah, but
fortunately for him, that was during a time where, you could get away with it because there wasn't as much of a media presence.
yeah, it's
So
strange.
it is. I mean, I'm in the midst of reading this book right now on Winston Churchill, and so one of the chapters was about his relationship with Roosevelt, and he recorded in his diary just how shocked he was the first time he met him in person once he had become president because they met years and years and years before, but when he met him as president, and FDR invited him to his house in New York, upstate New York, and Churchill went, and he was just absolutely shocked at the state of him. But FDR still drove, so he had a special vehicle that allowed him to drive with his hands, control like the accelerator and brake with his hands rather than his legs because his legs obviously didn't work.
Yeah,
So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine? Well, like the governor of Texas is in a wheelchair.
Abbott, Greg Abbott.
Yeah,
Is
yeah,
he?
yeah. I don't
When
know the story behind that, but yeah,
I
he's
didn't
like
know that.
he can't walk, so I
No, I
don't think
didn't
it
know that.
matters.
Huh.
I think it matters to people as long as you're like strong on immigration and you're
Yeah.
just like
In Texas for sure.
just kidnapping people and putting them on planes and flying them to Chicago.
Listen, you can still shoot a gun in a wheelchair.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll see what happens with Texas under the new tariffs, which we mentioned before. But Trump has been kind of backing away from like, did you see the thing about being? He was asked about the grocery prices, and he was like, "Well, like it's really hard to once they go up, it's really hard to get them down. It's just like I don't see the grocery prices going down anytime soon." And it's like all those people who
Really?
said, "Yeah, this is a big story last week." Just
I wonder of
straight up admitted that that was just a political talking point for him.
course it was. I wonder what your buddy in Texas would say to that.
I don't know. He probably didn't even know that Trump said that. I don't think he follows the news. This is the thing, man. Like a lot of these people said this before about him, they're not well read and, I don't think they're like very like paying attention every day to the news. Like a lot of people you talk to along those lines that have this virus or are just voting for whatever, they're not like they'll say to you like, "Oh, I don't watch the news," or "I don't, I
Yeah.
don't pay attention." And their algorithms on their social media platforms don't show them these things, you know. So
Yeah, and I think most people in that sort of category are like, "Okay, the election's over, so now we don't have to pay attention."
yeah, remember when the last election when mom was like, "Oh, I can't wait till the election is over and this COVID thing will go away."
Just I remember, like, vividly when she said that to me, and I was speechless. Like, it took me a moment to, like, figure out what do I say after this? And that I do think, like, that is a good example of what, like, we're saying is a mind virus, is that when you are hearing things from a candidate and saying, "I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this," and it just defies logic, but you still believe it, full line, hook, line, and sinker. Like that, I think that is an element of like being duped in what you would call a mind virus in many ways.
I think a lot of these people, as far as she goes, is you're right. Like the interest in consuming that kind of information is not there every day. Like she just goes home, reads a book, and watches something on TV that's like, true crime related. And she goes to work, and then all these people are probably talking about it. And
Mhm.
that's where the influence comes in of like, oh, well, this is, I don't even think they've, a lot of people aren't skeptical of what people are telling them. Even their friends and coworkers, they're just
Yeah.
like, this is what is being talked about, and that's it. And it's just
No,
that
I
simple.
I agree, and I think again, I know we're recovering territory here, but I also think that a lot of this comes down to a single issue or two issues that are going to determine your vote. And so if you agree and find alignment on whatever that one or two issues are, it makes you overlook everything else. And on some degree, we all have to do that because we know not one candidate is perfect. And so you do have to kind of do, a cost benefit analysis of a candidate, and not there's no candidate that's going to be perfect in any area. But I think the extreme of that is you pick those one or two things and then you just intentionally overlook every other thing. And I think that's part of what happened with a lot of people who voted for Trump, is that they found one or two issues, whether it be groceries, like your buddy, or something else, and then they're just willing to overlook everything else.
Yeah, the grocery thing is crazy because like it is affecting everyone. Like everyone's noticed it, and I think it's just going to get worse. Like there was a thing recently here where Albertsons and Kroger were trying to merge, and a federal judge knocked that down, which was a good thing because I feel like when those things merge, then you don't have there's just one other option
Yeah,
that's
it's
not
less
there for you,
competition.
and they can do whatever they want as far as like pricing goes, like
Yeah,
more so when there's
yeah.
less competition. Like America has been moving towards this a lot too, about just conglomerates, like everything under the same banner. Amazon owns the Washington Post.
Mhm.
All this stuff is just like two or three entities, and like it's been going that way for a long time. And like I don't think that I know for a fact that that's not good. And when there are less options, there's just a zombification of the proletariat.
That's a big word. Well, I think that's one of the ironies of the right is that you're having these huge conglomerates because you're deregulating, right? So you're allowing it to happen. But in the process of allowing these conglomerates to happen, you're actually destroying the free market, right? And so from the conservative principle, the capitalist principle is that the more competition the better, because the more competition you have, ironically it fights inflation and drives prices down, which then creates more ability for people to purchase, and purchasing power goes up, and supply and demand and all this sort of stuff. But in one sense, the deregulation is having an adverse effect on that. And so that's part of the whole system as well. Is I, th- I think gone are the days where you can have sort of a nuanced position on things. It just has to be one or the other. And I think people, we live in a headline sort of age where whatever the headlines say, that's the beginning and the end of the truth, and we leave it at that.
Yeah, I saw the headline going back to the Germany thing. The headline, it was a headline from like New York Times that was saying that their government collapsed. And all these German people were in the feed going like, "What? This is the worst headline ever. Like this is not what happened."
Exactly right. It's not like a
It's like you
coup or
can't even,
something.
and the thing is like this legacy media thing is true. Is like, ABC just paid Trump 15 million for a defamation thing, and like people are viewing that as like, oh, they're done. Like they're owned by Trump now. Like they bent the knee,
Right.
and
Right.
like the media has been that way for a long time. I mean, Trump has been railing against it as far as like fake news and like all that stuff, and like he has his own axe to grind that's stupid, but there is like this distrust of the media, and there's good
There's
and there's
there's some
there's
good
good.
reason for it.
Yeah, I mean, there's stuff like that, like just
Yeah,
like clickbait. Like since the internet
totally.
became a thing, it's just like you're trying to get clicks, and the way to get clicks is to put outlandish words together.
Or to just be very, very clever in the way that you have a headline with maybe like a picture. Like I saw this the other day, like, and I fell for it, and it was an ESPN article, and it was a picture of Dan Lanning, who's the head coach for University of Oregon, and the headline was like something along the lines of um, "Major disruption on Oregon coaching staff as coach looks for new position." But it was a picture of Dan Lanning. Click on it, and they're talking about the running back coach.
Yeah,
It's like, okay, that's so misleading, so
yeah,
stupid,
yeah. It's crazy too. Like I want to go back to this thing of like things are just always looping backwards, because like I don't know if media was ever trustworthy, because in the early 1900s there's this term called yellow journalism,
Yeah, that's true.
and it got us in a war with Spain over Cuba, and it was caused by Hearst papers pushing this propaganda of like, we need to do something down here, that the Spain is evil and all this stuff, and like it pushed us into this war, and that was all done by yellow journalism. And it's like, well, it's nothing new.
Yeah, no, it's
Nothing.
not.
Nothing.
Nothing's new under the sun. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Speaking of sports, though, did you see that story about Brian Kelly
Was
matching
it
a
about? Yeah.
matching $1 million? It's like, what?
So, dude, I almost sent this to you because I don't know how or why I got it, but I got an email, and the email was from Brian Kelly, and it was like asking me to contribute towards his matching gift. I was like,
You're not a LSU alum?
No, I know. I don't know why in any sort of way, like, it would have been sent to me. I don't know. But I almost sent it to you. And it was like, "Hey, man, you want to contribute to this with me?"
No, not from not no.
I wouldn't know. I'm
Back
not.
up.
I wish he would leave. I really, really
I
do.
do
Like
too,
I'm
man.
tired of that guy
I saw,
already.
I say keeping this in the political realm before the election, James Carville was
Yeah.
on Dan Lebitard,
Okay.
and he was pushing some documentary that he was doing, but they wanted to talk sports with him. And he's, obviously he's like the biggest LSU fan. And they were asking about Brian Kelly because I think the general national viewpoint on Brian Kelly is like, we don't like this guy. Nobody likes this guy. Like,
No.
and the thing is like Carville was taken up for him
Okay.
because he was like, hey, did you see the 2 seasons we had before he was here? Like, we were terrible. Well, now we're winning 10 games a year. Like, come on. But his sort of like sticking point was like, oh, we took him away from Notre Dame and we hate Notre Dame. And it's like, no, we
Cares?
don't. We don't have no beef with Notre Dame,
No.
other than what everybody in the world just thinks Notre Dame is stupid. But it's not like like we're trying to take things from them.
No. I
But
would.
he
I
was
actually would. I'd push back on Carville and go. You know what, dude? When's the last time you were in Southern Louisiana? I bet you there's a ton of people in Southern Louisiana who are Catholics who love Notre Dame. That's their second favorite football team. Like
true.
that has nothing to do with it. Yeah. No, so I just brought this email up and it's from Brian Kelly, head coach, $1 million match. Dear LSU football supporter. I don't know how they got my email address.
You must have
So,
signed up for something, man.
I mean, if I did, it would have been ages.
Like some kind of newsletter.
I have no idea because it would have been ages and ages and ages ago. I don't know. Anyway, I just thought that was funny. I was just like, it's a distraction. He's trying to distract from all the negative publicity he's getting.
I mean, he made like this big point at the end of the year at this press conference to say like, we're taking names, we're taking notes, we're coming back for
Yeah.
people. You're 8-4. Shut up.
And that's where I'm like, Carville, what are you talking about? We're not winning 10 games this year. Shut up.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, give me a break, dude. Yeah. No, I'm not down with that. There needs to be a whole reboot down in Baton Rouge and New Orleans.
I think there needs to be a reboot for the whole nation.
Well,
You
that's
know,
true. I agree. So when you think about 4 years from now, assuming that Trump will not have rigged it to where he can run again,
I mean, Bannon is saying that he can. Like
I don't
he's
believe it.
come out and saying that I think he can run for another one.
He's trying to make money. But assuming 4 years from now, who's the person you're looking at going, they might can make a difference? Is there anybody on the radar?
Well, our governor of Illinois,
Right?
Pritzker,
What's the
Governor
name?
Pritzker, Governor Pritzker.
Pritzker. Okay. I'm not familiar.
He's from a very, very, very rich family, billionaires, true
Okay.
billionaires.
Gotcha.
But he's a Democratic governor of Illinois, and he's in his second term, and
Pretty popular?
he's popular, and he's kind of like a hard-nosed Democrat. He's not like what you would think of like say AOC, who I'm not saying she's not hardcore, but also, speaking of her, before getting back to Pritzker, she's trying to get on this committee, this oversight committee,
Mm-hmm.
which is good. I think that
Yep.
that's a good
Yeah.
move for her, and I hope that works. But yeah, Pritzker, I would think would be a big one. I think during the lead up, there was a lot of talk about the Pennsylvania governor Shapiro,
Yeah.
but I think he's lost a little. I think he's kind of like I think he's just a media darling. I think Pritzker is a good one.
What's his age? Like, how old is he?
He's probably in his late 50s.
Okay. And this is
Also,
his second term?
yeah, and he's
Yeah.
like he's like when Biden dropped out, his name was thrown out there if they were going to have like an open convention.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he could be good because I think that he just knows how to get things done. He's been really good in Illinois. And like I said, I think he's like one of those Democrats that could he could cross over because like you're getting like, you're not, Chicago with the way Chicago goes, Illinois goes. But Illinois is a big state
Yeah.
and he's like tough and fair on Chicago. He doesn't just like one of the things personally that I know of that he's been kind of like tough on is like sports in Chicago, like the Bears and the White Sox in general, who just came off the worst season of any baseball team ever,
Right. Right.
are trying to their owner Reinsdorf. No one likes him. Everyone hates him in Chicago. He owns the Bulls and the White Sox, and the White Sox have this stadium, what they call the South Side. It's in this neighborhood called Bridgeport, and they've been there forever. And this stadium that they built in the '90s, they need a new place, right? No one goes out there. They don't get a lot of fans. But they're looking to move, and there's been all this talk about them moving to Nashville. Because you
What?
remember that? Yeah, do you remember the old Oakland A's pitcher Dave Stewart?
Totally.
So he's part of this group that is trying to bring a Major League Baseball team to Nashville,
Wow.
and they've been in a lot of talks with Reinsdorf about like maybe moving the team there. But obviously, there's a lot of Chicago people are like, no, man, you can't do that. So there's this neighborhood. It's not a neighborhood. It would be a new neighborhood. There are 77 neighborhoods in Chicago. So Sarah's company that she works for, this real estate company, they own or they have the rights to develop this piece of land just south of the Loop, the downtown area, and it's called the 78 because it would be a new neighborhood and it'd be the 78th neighborhood. And they were lobbying, they're still trying to lobby Illinois, the state of Illinois, to try and build a new stadium for the White Sox there.
Her real estate company or the White Sox or
Her
both?
real estate her real estate company is trying to like woo, like I think the White Sox would do it, obviously, because it'd be a new stadium and they wouldn't have to pay for it. But this is where Pritzker comes in, where he's like, no, we're not raising taxes so you can have a new stadium. Like he's been really hard on it because they'd have to like pass this sort of like new law for it to happen. And the Bears are also like the Bears are trying to move out of Soldier Field. They bought this piece of
Hmm.
land way out in the suburbs, but they don't want to leave the city. So when
Hmm.
this stuff with the White Sox was going on, they were like, "We'll stay too. We'll build a new place." And Pritzker's been tough on them. He's been like, "No, man, you got." So he's like fair,
Okay.
even though like Chicago drives most of the Democratic machine in the state. He's still kind of like tough and like thinks of the whole state. So I think he would be a good pick. Another one that I like is Buttigieg. This guy, every time this guy's on TV and speaks, it's like there's all the sense in the world that he's saying, you know?
I agree. Yeah, he's always sharp. He always has a clear head, and he kind of gets right to the point of things. He knows his facts. I mean, I think he's a pretty sharp guy as well. Yeah.
So I think there's hope, you know, if there is an election.
Hmm.
And if there is an election, Trump is obviously off the scene. But I find that hard to believe that will happen. Like he's not going to give that up again, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I hope he does. I mean, it might come down to health as well.
Yeah. There's always that. So we're trying to understand these sort of movements, and we've been calling them viruses, but like they do seem pretty similar in a sense that like you sort of, I don't know though. I said this last time. I was like, I feel like one of them at least is trying to move forward, and one of them is just stuck in the past. And I still believe that. I still think that is the case, and I think that you know at least I think one of them is just worse than the other, is what I'm saying,
Right.
to put it in
Well,
terrible terms.
maybe I think for me the hard thing when you put it into terms like forward and staying in the past is that forward automatically in a general way seems to be positive, And so I think kind of the woke mindset is more about change, where the MAGA mindset is probably less so about change and kind of keeping things the way they are. And I think both, like I said last time, there can be positive things to change, but there can be negative things to change. There can be positive things to staying where you're at, and there can be negative things to staying where you're at. But I definitely think, yeah, I think they're trying to do different things for sure, and they're at polar opposites of what that is. And I think because of the opposite nature of what they're doing, there's an automatic sense of you're against me in everything. And so that plays into kind of the two extremes.
Yeah, and I think they are extremes, but there's stuff to be learned from all of this because, like, I do think going back to like the generational thing of like not understanding the generation gaps, and like, not understanding our own kids, like our dad probably didn't understand rap or hip hop. And
Yeah.
I think these things are important, right? Like stuff that pop up in the culture and parts of our culture that they're all tied together with politics, I think, because like moving forward is hard, change is hard. No, like change is probably the one constant in the universe. And yet as humans, it's the hardest thing for us. But flip side of that coin, we're really good at adaptation.
Hmm.
Like when push comes to shove, we do it every day. Like things are changing every day and we're adapting to them whether we know it or not. So like there's this disconnect in recognizing that. Like, okay, yeah, like the younger generations are going to have a different outlook on life. Like there was this whole push of like, 3 or 4 years ago about millennials being like they don't care about working a 40-hour week. They don't care about owning a home. They don't care about like having kids. Like, you know, this is the way their minds are viewing the world. And for most people, boomers, Gen X, it's a strange thing not to like for younger generations not to covet the things that they covet.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely agree with that. I mean, I think you're always going to have that sort of generational disconnect as people are coming. I mean, even now, looking ahead to Generation Z and Generation Alpha, like they're unique distinctives that come from that as well. And again, it's that back and forth, because it's like I think coming up in teens and early 20s as a Generation X, there was a sense of seeing things differently and seeing things as the way that they should be. And I do think like the cyclical nature of getting older is recognizing that just because something is new and fresh doesn't mean it's best, and that there is value in learning from the past, and there's value in understanding how things maybe have been talked about and maybe even discussed and decided as well. And so every generation has that tension of wanting to push people in a different direction while also not falling into the trap that just because it's new, it's better. And so every named generation has its own version of that, I think. And I think the wisdom found in it is when you can learn from intergenerational conversation, quite frankly. I think that's where you find wisdom.
I also think we're at this strange time where technology is moving faster than we
Hmm.
can keep up with mentally, emotionally. But like if in the past, like probably 150 years since the industrial age started, things are moving really, really fast. Like before that, like not much change technology wise. But now we talked about it last time about quantum computing chips and things like that. Um, it's just almost becoming like a snowball rolling down a hill. It's just like, okay, well, this is just going to go where it goes, and we have no real control over it.
Hmm.
Like I'm still trying to get my mind around the quantum chip. Like I had a friend that listens to this and he like, I don't want to get it wrong. I think he did. I don't know what he does now. Maybe he's doing the same thing, but he was working for Amazon. They have a division. Obviously everyone's working on their own artificial intelligence and quantum chips and stuff like that. And quantum computing is becoming a big thing. Like is another thing in Chicago that Pritzker has been a big part of, and Sarah's company has been a big part of. Is like they've converted this old steel mill area in South Chicago into this place where they're going to have this massive. It's going to be the biggest quantum computing campus in America.
Crazy.
IBM just agreed to move in to this location, so it's like a big thing. But my friend was like selling this. He was like a salesman for this stuff, this product that I think it's Amazon had had built or developed, and it was like this facial recognition software. But he was responding to me about the quantum chip, and he was saying like it will be a game changer in the medical field, but also like on the flip side of that is like what it will do to artificial intelligence, and like it will just break, like everything will be open, like there will be no codes, there will be no like firewalls, like everybody could see into everything. And
Wow.
he thinks that China's already kind of doing that
Hmm.
with their own quantum computing.
I mean, I don't see how that would actually come. How people would allow that to happen, though, because if that's actually the case, like there's too much financial interest. Like when we're talking about like politics and people being in power, there's too much financial interest in people not having their information out there, and so there surely is going to be some sort of like pushback to that, or some sort of company that's going to buy that technology and shelve it. I just don't. I mean, maybe I'm just like just totally out there, but it just seems to be there's too much financial interest in order for everything to just be open and available.
Yeah, that's why I saw a story today from some guy. I forget who he's with, but he's with some. He was saying like at some point you're gonna have to, with AI, you're gonna have to unplug it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's this show.
But that's when Skynet knows, like becomes self aware, and then just punches the button on the nukes. And when you're getting close to unplugging Skynet,
Well, then that's when you're
Judgment
going to have
Day.
that's when you're going to have the Butlerian jihad. That's what's
Yep.
going to happen.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's where maybe that's why apocalyptic literature always ends in like humanity having to do a massive reboot because technology just gets to a point where it has to just be destroyed.
Yeah. Thinking machines have to go.
Hey man, exactly. No Matrix.
What is this guy's power though on Dune? I haven't watched the latest one. So, but like, have you watched the new show?
Yeah, I haven't watched. Aren't they just released episode 4? I've watched the first 3, but not the 4th one,
Well, so
I
what? Like
think.
this guy gets swallowed by a worm, and now he has like he can just light people on fire.
I don't understand what that is. Yeah, because that's not something that we've seen before, right? In the universe?
Yeah, like is he like a predecessor to the Kwisatz Haderach?
Maybe so. I don't know. I mean,
I
it's a
mean,
very
the voice
or
didn't
what
work
ab-
on him.
or what about the one where the girl can like is she a shapeshifter or is she channeling like the dead?
She's a face dancer.
So what does that mean?
So like the Benny Tilaxu, the people that created the the Duncan Idaho clones,
Right, 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 right.
they also make these people that can shapeshift their faces. They're called
So
face
it is a
dancers.
shapeshifter then.
It is a part of the Dune lore, yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Because I was just like, what is that? I've
I
never
know.
seen that
It's
before.
very like yeah, it's very dramatic, but like in the books, there aren't like scenes described of people doing it, like the process of actually like shifting.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, it's getting interesting.
Anyway,
Yeah, I mean, I think like going back to the politics thing, to me, that's like I guess you can call it convergence. I think you can just call it human nature. I think every aspect of humanity wants to be in power and in control, and they're going to do whatever they can to manipulate that. And they believe, I mean, going back to like the Dune reference, they believe that they're right and that what they're pursuing is the best for everybody. So I don't think that changes over time.
No, it doesn't. Anyway, that's the latest.
That's been a good one.
Yeah.
That's probably a wrap for 2024.
Yeah, for MBD, My Brother's Deeper. Yeah, we'll come back next year. Hopefully. Well, I guess we could just keep talking the way we're talking. Just like not really have like a format. It's just talk about whatever's going on in the
Kind of riffing.
Yeah. So
Maybe
anyway,
so. Maybe so.
I gotta use the bathroom.
Okay. Are we
Bye.
saying goodbye?
Yeah,
Goodbye.
we're saying goodbye. Bye.
Peace.